Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Alien versus Predator Galaxy podcast, the original Alien and Predator podcast. Today, I am starting the intro off, which I usually don't do, but
It's already
I
thrown you off.
it's already thrown me off. I am Adam Zeller, or as I'm known on the forums as RidgeTop, and joining me is the usual person who does these intros.
All right, Aaron Percival, aka Corporal Hicks.
And
Eric Adams, otherwise known as Xenomorphine.
that went all right. That went all right. Okay, so today we will be discussing the FX Alien TV series. We haven't really done a podcast episode on this before. We've done a few motion trackers just on the news, but we thought there was enough meat in the news now that we could actually talk about some of the characters, some of the basic story elements, and our thoughts as to where the show could go and what we think about that's been revealed so far. So.
And don't forget the movie.
Right. So we also will be talking about the new movie that came out of nowhere, which was just announced. Director Fede
Alvarez.
Alvarez, right? Apparently, well, we'll get into
Yeah.
that whole juicy bit later, but very exciting news with that. So why don't we just start off with the FX TV series? Most recent news is that filming has been delayed again until I believe next year now. They're not filming until next year. So hopefully that will give them plenty of time with the pre-production to make sure they get it right. But also we've had some character news. We know that the show will center on consciousness transference, and we also were able to confirm that news and give some little additional details in terms of the main character, Wendy, and we'll get into that as well. But first of all, why don't we just start off in that, Aaron, why don't you begin just by saying, what do you think of all the news that's come out? I know we do have to kind of be careful because we still know more than has been revealed, but we'll just be talking about what is public at this point and things we would like to see in the show. But so far, with all the recent news and developments, how are you feeling about things?
I tend to lean towards a cautious optimism to do with anything to do with Alien or Predator. I'm not gonna lie, there is always an initial excitement as well. I'm a fan. I cannot not be excited about new material. So, with each, I mean, it's also weird because we do know what we know.
We know more than what we can talk about.
Yeah, which is always an unusual experience when it comes to covering these things. It was for Covenant, it was for, to some extent, the Predator as well. Although we're generally free on Prey and obviously this new thing, so that might be a bit more of a throwback experience. But yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic. I always am. I want the best of everything, but I also don't want to prejudge it too much because a lot of the info that we get for releases tends to be dribs and drabs. It's leaks that might not be intended to get out there without certain context, stuff like that. Character details leaking via what I presume to be casting calls and stuff like that. So it's not necessarily info for us as much as it is for the people preparing for these roles. So it's always weird, but that's always the fun of doing what we do, of covering the news for nerds who are as obsessed as we are. But I always try to not get too in my head about the news as it's presented and to see and to try and remain open-minded so that when it actually finally drops, I'm not coming into it with all these preformed opinions. But on the other side of that, I'm curious. I'm very curious to see how it all pans out, especially the consciousness transfer stuff, because it's so not alien, but it's, I mean, there's precedence in there. We've talked about this on some of the motion trackers. Eisenberg from AVP2, to some extent, not Olivia. What was the sister's name? Viola. Although that was completely different because that was computer modeling based on personality and stuff like that. There's Blue, Marsalis in Alex White's books. Again, not quite the same, but along the same veins. But it's it's not Alien as much as I feel like it's Ridley Scott, even though it's not Ridley Scott doing it. It's not his concepts, but it feels like it's Alien in an extension, that it feels like Ridley Scott in the same way that I think things that are Giga feel like Alien through extension. So it's a very weird concept, very weird situation that I'm really, really curious to see how it pans out.
And Eric, how are you feeling about things so far?
Well, as ever, I'm going to wait and see before I make judgments, as I find in Alien and especially Predator fandom at the moment, there are too many people willing to leap on the judgmental bandwagon. But I'm not very enthused based on what we've seen so far. And just to qualify that, what I mean by that is, how can I put this? It might have been interesting to see something based on, genetics and things. There's a lot in the news, not just, the obvious outbreak, but there's a lot of it in the news about, for example, China trying to right now optimize biological warfare for ethnic groups. That's all stuff that could play directly into the alien. What we're actually being given is a lot of talk about corporate executives, wealth redistribution, social inequalities, why AI somehow is going to totally kill everyone in the future. I haven't heard anything about how the alien will play a component in the story. Now, it doesn't mean to say it won't. I'm sure it will, but because we've been given several chances for the people behind this to kind of market it, and we're starting to see that pattern, and it feels like that stuff is going to be the center of it rather than something to do with the alien driving it forward. That is the worry. Doesn't mean to say that's what's going to happen, but that is the worry. And yeah, the transhuman stuff, the cybernetic implants, all that could be interesting, but the problem with that is it's been done before. You got shows like Altered Carbon. You've got a show which some people might not now remember, Caprica, which is the Battlestar Galactica prequel that was out there. Now we've had some character details. There's stuff in there which feels very close to Caprica, to the point where I honestly have to wonder, have they watched Caprica and they've decided to maybe copy some stuff? I don't know, but it's a worry. So the stuff we've been told, the world building stuff, I'm a little worried that feels a little lazy now, and it's all been there, seen that before. But I'm willing to give it a chance. It's just that so far, also it must be said that some of the stuff Noah Hawley has said, by what his understanding of Alien is about, I don't necessarily agree with. Like the whole thing about, it was always woke and all the rest of it. Alien is anti-corporate. It's not necessarily anti-capitalist. There's a big difference there. And when you're trying to give hints of that might be what this series revolves around, like there's also a part, let me find it, where he talks about he quotes, "It's ultimately a classic science fiction question. Does humanity deserve to survive?" I've seen that in so many things, but this nihilistic viewpoint of does humanity deserve to survive? It's so pessimistic. That makes the whole series feel like a downer from the start. I remember when Battlestar Galactica did do its remake that became successful, but it started out with a pilot episode of Adama, who in the original one from the 70s and 80s, he was this Picard-like figure who was talking about, no, humanity deserves a chance to prove wrong where we've gone wrong in the past. Humanity needs a chance, like Picard used to say to Q. Q in Star Trek was always saying humanity deserves to be wiped out, but Picard was saying, no, look at all the good things we've done in the past. And you've got, again, what is starting to become a trope now in science fiction of, does humanity even deserve to live? We should all die of sickness. And I think, do I want to invest that much time in my life wading through this on screen when we've got all this stuff in the news that's constantly down? I'm not saying make it happy clappy, but don't present all this stuff as though it's new and it's never been explored in sci-fi before. It
And Eric's
has, and I
feelings
want
on this
something
are complicated.
I just want it to be done in a refreshing way. If they're going to explore this stuff, do it new, present it in a refreshing way. I'm just worried from that kind of side.
See,
That's all.
You see, one of the things I do enjoy about the Alien series is it is very much. I mean, it's not necessarily all pessimistic. Alien 3 definitely is, but there's a lot of there's a lot of, and I suppose to some extent, Alien Covenant, which I'll put it out there. I like the pessimism. I love
Covenant
the
had
nihilistic
nihilistic elements, I think.
especially the ending. But I like that, and to me, Aliens always incorporated elements of that. And I mean, let's I know Eric has strong feelings on this, regardless. But the whole thing around the corporatist, capitalist stuff. Alien definitely very much is anti-corporations as well. But in some regards, I think there is elements of anti-capitalism in there, because it is Parker's. Well, I suppose Kane's drive for glory, monetary. Parker's drive for monetary glory, and
Well,
stuff
that is
like
more in
that.
the book, though.
It's in there. It's in the
We'll
series.
get into this debate.
Curiosity.
Let me tell you guys how I'm feeling about it before we start jumping into debate.
I want to say about Alien 3, though. Come.
We'll get to it. But so me personally, I'm very excited about the series. We've started to see more and more high production value TV series, especially in the world of sci-fi, with shows like The Expanse that are just killing it.
Streaming shows have looked so good lately.
Yeah,
The Expanse is fucking
compared
gorgeous.
to when we were growing up, Aaron. The budgets that TV series got compared to how they are now.
Well, they've been worse for Eric.
Huge now. Yeah, that's right. Even worse. But they're huge now.
Or Jerry Anderson for Eric.
Series compared to how they are now, that there's just a huge difference. And part of that is just the way the industry is going, I think. But I do feel like Alien could very much work in a TV series format. So I'm very excited to see what they do. Personally, I haven't been too put off by the news. I know people have been put off by Hulu. People have been put off by that. Oh, you're going to have aliens in this Alien series. We can confirm at least that much. There will be aliens in the show. But I'm excited for what Noah Hawley's going to do. I have not watched much of his work myself, but I've heard nothing but praise for Fargo and Legion. And I do want to watch his work and be more familiar with his work.
That was something I was going to ask before. I was like, should we actually go watch some Legion and Fargo before we sit down and do this episode? But I don't think we were going to make it through shows. I was always interested in Fargo, but I just never got around to it.
I did watch the pilot, and I will say the pilot was quite good for Fargo.
And the only reason I never watched Legion was because it was, X-Men adjacent, and I just wasn't interested.
Yeah, I do feel like it. From what I heard, it wasn't like X-Men proper. Like it was kind of its own thing.
Well, I think Christian was telling us that when he was on as well.
Yeah, but I'm more with you, Aaron. I'm keeping an open mind, because we've been unnecessarily worried before when it's come to things like Predators. So I'm always willing to keep an open mind.
And Isolation. I think of Isolation as a big example.
Yeah. So I'm always willing to keep an open mind. Sometimes I'll hear something of a project upcoming that I'm just like, oh, please don't do that. But honestly, with the series, I haven't really heard anything that's put off too much. And I'm also kind of with you, Aaron, and a number of movie news sites reported on this. I do feel like, no economic system is perfect, and there are downsides to capitalism that Alien has commented on in terms of worker exploitation. Call it corporate capitalism, hyper-capitalism, or crony capitalism, or whatever you want. But I do feel like that critique is there, and it's beyond just Alien in the series. It's been in the comics, it's been in the RPG, and it is a core central theme of Alien. So to see that explored more on an Earth level for the people that have not left Earth, I think could be a really interesting prospect. Seeing Earth, I think that's something that I'm really, really looking forward to. I know there's been some talk of the time period, and we'll get to that as well. But this will be the end of this century, so around Prometheus time, where we do have a number of colonized worlds. but the show will be primarily taking place on Earth. That's something that fans have been a little upset about as well. I'm personally interested to see that, and I think they can do it in a way where there's still stakes there if this is pre-Alien, and it's not something that becomes a widely known incident on Earth. So I'm very
Should we talk about the Earth setting? Should we go with there first?
Yeah, we can start with that. But to wrap up my thoughts, I'm excited. I think this will be an interesting new format for Alien. I just hope they actually start filming it soon, so we can see it sooner than rather than later.
Yeah, I think we've dealt with 3 pushbacks that we know of so far.
Maybe we'll see the movie before this. Who knows? But yeah, I'm excited. I'm liking what I'm hearing so far.
Can we just go back to Alien 3 just quickly, because I did want to point out, yeah, there is that vibe in Alien 3, but the part everyone, the fans of Alien 3 remember that it's the part where character stands up and says, "Do you want to die on your knees begging, or do you want to stand up?" It's when they rise up against adversity. That's what the good Alien films it's about. It's about
But
the
they still all
characters
die horribly right after
Yeah,
that.
they do, but they, and the ones you just sort of let it happen, you go, "What the hell?" sort of thing. It's Ripley. Remember Ripley, because she stood up. Lambert kind of froze up, and she was a victim. It's about not being a victim. The character, Hudson fell, but he fell doing something. He fell protecting others. It's about rising up. It's about proving it's not all humanity deserves to die.
No, it's not. It's not all. It's not the end message, but
Paul has
it's a
put that in
question,
some
isn't
interviews.
it?
He's been putting in. He said, like, "Oh, remember when Ripley said to Burke, oh, I don't remember which species is worse. I don't see the aliens effing each other for a goddamn percentage yet." But she wasn't damning the Marines. She wasn't damning Newt. She wasn't damning her old crew. She wasn't damning the Gateway Station people. She was damning specifically Burke and what he represented, Weyland-Yutani. She wasn't saying,
Well, she said, "I
all
don't
of
know which
humanity."
species is worse."
Yeah,
So
but
I think
it was a pointed comment at Burke and Weyland-Yutani. She wasn't said, "Screw you guys, I'm going back to the APC, you can stay here."
No, but I
trying to
think she
build
was making a
metaphor
commentary
that.
on. I think she was making a commentary on, "Hey, at least they don't stab each other in the back like you." So yes, she was
Yeah,
referring to
sure,
what he
but
was doing.
she wasn't damning humanity as a whole, whereas Noah
Well,
Hawley has put in this
when
thing.
you say species, it's kind of an encompassing word.
It was a generalization, though. She wasn't
I know,
jamming.
it's still, she's still talking
She wasn't damning
humanity.
Newt. She wasn't. She didn't say, "You know what? All these colonists who came out here to mine, they deserve to die." She said to
I
Burke,
think you're putting too much thought into this.
Yeah, but this is one. Noah Hawley has used this as a
Well,
crux of this thing about does humanity deserve to survive?
I think you can have overarching themes, and yeah, there's a possibility that with this subject matter and these themes, he bungles it and he pushes this that you know
The theme's too
woke
far into
messaging, if you
text.
want to call it that, too far, whatever. But I think you can have overarching themes, but still focus on a character, and you can still have a character rise up and meet
and
the
I hope
challenge
that is
within a
the
nihilistic
case.
context and a nihilistic world. I think that can be possible. But where are we going to go? The Earth setting first, Aaron?
Earth setting. Yeah.
So, yeah, why don't you tell us how you're feeling about that, Aaron? I know there's been some fan upset around the setting. There seems to be this notion that you just can't do aliens on Earth, even though it's been done well in the comics and some of the books. So, why don't you tell us, Aaron, what you think about the setting?
I think it's a bit of a hot potato. Like, I can get why people don't like it. And I'm not terribly sure how I think about it, to be honest. I mean, I totally get the perspective that it kind of spits in the face of what Ripley's attempting to do throughout the first 3 films. Her whole thing is about not letting the alien get back to Earth. Because if just one of these things gets in here, then all this bullshit that you kiss all that goodbye. And I get that, but on the same vein, it's like when I forget when we talked about it, Adam, but at some point, recently we were talking about time travel in Alien, and I was saying how I didn't want it to be that in a comic because it sets a precedence, which then makes it easier for me to digest. So because aliens on Earth has been a thing prior to Alien 3, it's been a thing for nearly as long as the franchise as a franchise has existed because of those
We
original
thought Alien 3 would be on Earth.
well
Yes.
well
I mean, it was sold to us that it would be
It
on
was
Earth
the
initially, but
best
that-
trailer ever. Was
that first teaser that none of the films ever remotely, well, I suppose maybe Toei's, because that was in orbit of Earth if I remember rightly, but yeah, so it doesn't feel as wrong to me because there's such a precedence for it. You know, and of course we've had the AVP films. And they were both set on Earth, and that's not a plus in their favor. But you know, again, it's precedence to the point where it's like, okay, I can digest this. This has been done before. But my problem with that tends to be there comes with it some predictability. So you know, we know this is set around the time of Prometheus. We don't know when exactly, but it's around the time of Prometheus. So if Noah Hawley is trying to maintain some continuity with the film, we know that whatever happens has to be an isolated incident. You know, they're going to do a Gunnison and blow up the city or town or compound or whatever that this is based on, and it's all going to be buried and stuff like that. And I don't enjoy predictability too much in that regards because I find looking for that red button distracting. You know, it was a problem I had with Out of the Shadows on my first read through. I kept looking for that reset button as I was going through, and I found it distracting to the experience. And that's sort of like my big problem with setting it on Earth, because you can't do what I would really want you to do from setting it on Earth, and that is see infestation. But obviously, again, we know we can't do that because of
if it's
resurrection.
pre-Alien,
Yeah. And
and
we can't do
Resurrection
that.
too, yeah.
Yeah. So that means if you were to do that, you'd have to then go post-resurrection, which is
Well,
the
with
sucky part.
Resurrection too, a lot of people just say drop Resurrection because there's been so many stories post Alien
Well,
3 where the aliens have been around, and
yeah, but
Resurrection it's implied they haven't been seen since Alien 3.
that's why we have the big deletion. Don't worry about that. But yeah, I mean, the ideal period for me is post Alien 3 before Resurrection. And again, there would have to be some sort of reset button in there. But I feel like it would give more freedom, perhaps, if it was to be like a more developed colony world, where we did get to see things run amok. And, you know, I mean a more developed colony world. I don't mean Space IKEA at Hadley's Hope. I mean something that's got infrastructure and, you know, has been around for a while. And yes, it would then obviously have to be an isolated incident because of Resurrection or whatever. But, I mean, there's ways around making that interesting that I think would be less distracting than setting it on Earth before possibly any of the films. You know, we don't know if it's before Prometheus yet. So I totally get it. I totally worry about it myself in some regards, but it's not a killer to me. Again, because like I said, I've seen it in the comics, I've seen it in AVP. I'm used to it. And the same as the timeline thing doesn't bother me. Again, because I know there's going to be a reset button. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to see aesthetics that are Prometheus-ish, with the way that Hawley has been talking, you know, talking about the whole humanity angle and the corporationist angle. I can totally see us seeing some worn down kind of things, and some noticeable difference in aesthetics based on, you know, different statuses within society and stuff like that. So that none of that bothers me because I'm sure there'll be interesting visuals there in terms of aesthetics. But I don't know. It's a bit of a, in the grand scheme of things, I find it a bit of a non-issue, but I totally get where people are coming from.
Yeah, I understand the concern. For me, Ripley was like, how I took it was Ripley was less concerned about the alien getting back to Earth than she was humanity getting their hands on the alien, because humanity had colonized a number of worlds at this point. Even if Earth fell like it did in the comics and Earth War, you'd still have humanity on a number of worlds. But if she saw the alien as enough of a threat that it would just spread, it would stow on ships and it would just spread, then that was the greater threat than it just getting to Earth. But I do think it could be an interesting setting. And we saw in that Covenant deleted scene a city that I guess was supposed to be set on Earth, if you take the prequel novel into account, which I don't think they'll touch on anything in that, Aaron, like the anti-colonization cult or anything. But
there was so many interesting angles in that book, but it was just such a dud in the end. You
Yeah.
still haven't read it, have you?
I still haven't, just because you didn't. I
Yeah.
need to just read it. But does it talk about like how colonized humanity has gotten at that point in the prequel
I
novel?
don't remember. I've read it the once. I have no desire to go back to it.
Maybe we need to do a podcast on that one. We've been doing a lot of the bad book podcasts, it seems, but I'm not opposed to the Earth setting. Again, I really like seeing more of a city colony, like a big city colony in that comic Dust to Dust. And so I feel like you could have a human city and have those kind of Blade Runner aesthetic elements, not crazy dystopic like Blade Runner,
Okay.
but
Here's the big question: is how would we want to see Earth portrayed?
depends on how much of Earth we're seeing, you know. Um, if this is contained to a city or an island or something, I don't know, some facility somewhere underground, like we have, well,
Oil rig
we
on
know,
the middle
but
of the sea.
we can't say where on Earth this is going to take place. So
Well, I guess the question's more: do you think or want, and of course this is to you as well, Eric, but do you think or want that it would lean too much into the Blade Runner, into that neon future?
I think that's the temptation's going to be there. What's interesting is that they might, even if they're not going to do the Blomkamp project, we do know that we saw some cityscapes in that. They have the rights to it, and somebody might have looked back into that concept art and gone, yeah, you know what, let's just use this. What might harm this? You said about Earth, but it's the Earth plus prequel nature of it that runs the danger of it feeling like it's a project which is sweeping its legs from under itself, because the stakes, no matter how high the stakes are going to get, you're going to have that inevitable moment where somebody says, what if this gets loose? And you as a viewer know it's not going to get loose. Nothing like that. Whether it's the alien or something, an offshoot of it, it's not going to happen. What could have been interesting and cheap to do from a production standard, especially with the kind of stuff they got with Mandalorian, is to not set it in a city at all, have them uncovering some sort of alien archaeological ruins, and you've got some sort of away team they've set up a base around that sort of stuff, and they find something to do with the alien. And you could have all that stuff like the hieroglyphics we never got to see in the original film. Things like that could have been interesting. You don't have to do a human settlement at all, but I would guess, I mean, we know this is being filmed in Thailand, I think, so we might have to
partially.
look at, we might need to look up what some of the architecture is there is like. But I would wager this is probably going to have some sort of laboratory component or whatever. So I would think, based on what little we know of the story, we're going to have a good portion set in some sort of subterranean base where you're not even seeing cityscapes at all. And it's going to be that sort of Battlestar Galactica thing where you see a lot of spaceship interiors, but you never actually see the city unless they went back to Caprica itself. It's going to be, most of it is going to be interiors, but there's nothing stopping them from doing big cityscapes if they want. Because look at Boba Fett, look at Mandalorian. I mean, in Boba Fett, you had Tatooine and Mos Eisley, but they actually made those desert alien cities like Middle Eastern, massive in scale there. Basically, they can do what they want with it. But I would like to see not cityscapes, nothing. I would like to see just alien archaeology, not sit on Earth, have it somewhere isolated enough that you could have that thing about what if it gets loose, and maybe it would affect some sort of colony above ground or something. This way does feel limited, but by the same token, how do we know that's not going to be a plot development? Maybe they will switch over to another location at some point. We don't know. We just know it's the majority of stuff, at least in the pilot episode, is going to be set in Earth. What if the story dovetails?
We do know, Eric. You haven't been fully caught up. We know more
well,
than a
you
little
haven't
about the
told
story.
me. So I was also going to point out, we talked about Alien Resurrection, but do you remember there was that little hint in Alien Resurrection when they said, it's based in the solar system by Pluto and that, but they said, oh yeah, the jurisdiction of space. They were doing these experiments deliberately outside of jurisdiction. I would be interested if they played around with that kind of thing. So they're trying to do whatever they're going to do in this show, they have to do it within certain areas that have no legal jurisdiction. Like, for example, me as someone who's very into UFO lore and that, and the real subject of underground military bases, because there's a hell of a lot of those that are real things. They've been dug away underground for nuclear bunkers and what have you. A lot of the ones we know that the US has on US soil, sometimes they're in from very weird areas, and researchers go, why the hell are they there? And they realize they're actually sort of under the ground in like Native American reservations, because legally they can get away with doing things in jurisdiction in them that they couldn't if they were based somewhere else. But it's because they're underground, no one's the wiser. So it'd be interesting if they play around with that kind of thing, because then you could have all manner of locations. They could even have something based undersea. Now, we played Colonial Marines the other day, and you two were saying it would be interesting if they did something undersea. How about they have an undersea base? You could do that on Earth.
Yeah,
and that would be a way of isolating it.
That kind of could have been a possibility for Blomkamp's thing as well, couldn't it?
Well, there was this oil rig that I guess had an underwater component to it based on the concept art. But yeah, you guys know I'm a Resident Evil fan, so I would love me a giant underground research facility. And I do think an underwater base idea could be kind of cool too. We saw that in that comic a little bit, Fast Track to Heaven, where they had the space elevator going down into the oceans of Europa a bit. So something like that could be like something super isolated, could be a real cool element. But that also plays to the stakes idea, right? Like AVP was isolated in Antarctica, so it like the stakes are not exactly super high. They're still high for the characters that were invested in here, but it's like, is it going to be that contained? Is it going to be that isolated?
Yeah, the thing is, if you're going to play around with, it's going to be set on Earth anyway, or the solar system, at least make the environment unusual enough, like compelling
and interesting.
You just want to tune in just to see what they do with it. Although, as we've said, it would have been more interesting to set it maybe at some ambiguous future point on a different planet. But wherever it's set, it doesn't have to be a city. It can be something other than that. And we've seen cities played around with all the time in sci-fi. Maybe it is time to base it somewhere else.
And I suppose that to go on what you were saying, Adam, the stakes, it puts limiting it puts a lot on the actors and the characters as to how much of a shit we actually give about them.
Right.
Which, I mean, to be fair, is kind of necessary. I don't feel like we've really had, outside of David, and I know that's a bit of a hot topic as well, the last 4 Alien films, and yes, I'm counting the AVPs, I don't think we've really had any characters that would be considered massive fan favorites.
Like Ricky?
No. And I mean, even Shaw, I hate Shaw, and I know there were some people
you
who
hate Shaw. I thought you liked Shaw.
No, I don't
has
like
her
Shaw.
admirers, but
I find her doggedness, clinging to her beliefs,
dogmaticness. Is that
just the way she clings to her beliefs in the face of
zealousy? Or is zealousy a word? What would fanaticism? I don't know, but I don't know. She was an interesting character in that she was a scientist, but she also.
But that duality wasn't. That duality was barely a part of her character. I mean, I know scientists like that exist, and I would have loved to have seen maybe more discussion around that in the film. But when it comes to it, it's like, right, we've met our literal gods, our literal creators, but I think there must be more. There's got to be an actual god as defined by the Bible.
Those are the actual space jockeys.
So maybe it's maybe it's the people who made the engineers. I find that very frustrating. And I find her very frustrating.
We know from, if you remember back in the day, we did have all those interviews from Ridley Scott saying that he'd met all those kind of scientists who were still religious, and he found that fascinating, and that was what he was going for. But it's like you said, he didn't really explore the duality. There were no philosophical, not debates, but there weren't moments where the character questions things.
Just a
and
pure
has-
discussion,
It didn't propel the story forward. It was like a character who has that facet to them, but it didn't move the story forward, and it should have contributed to the story. But we talked about that before. It would have been nice if he'd have done that kind of thing with the ancient astronaut theory as well, and that was kind of squandered as well. There's a lot of balls that were picked up in Prometheus and they weren't really played with.
Yeah, ancient astronaut theory was one of them. I feel like AVP played with it more than Prometheus,
Yes,
honestly.
it
Which
did.
Prometheus just kind of used it for a springboard for the story.
Yeah.
But talking about the characters and our investment in them, I guess brings us to, it's a good segue to, we've had our first kind of details revealed publicly about the characters. And I believe the two characters are Wendy and Hermit. And these details were broken by entertainment news website, the Illuminati, which we were unfamiliar with. But after seeing their reporting, we knew it was legit, and so we decided to report on it ourselves. And like you were saying, Aaron, we assume they probably got their hands on a casting call for some of the characters, but two notable characters they mentioned are Wendy, who is a little girl, and we revealed the details that her consciousness is transferred into a synthetic body in the story. And her brother, who goes by Hermit, or is part of Prodigy Tactical Response, which Prodigy was brought up. So we know there's another corporate player in this series, the Prodigy Corporation. But as far as
an actual real company back in the day.
No, didn't know that.
Yeah.
But as far as the
I think that when the communications thing, I've got to look this up.
I think so. I think they were an internet one as well. There was something to do with that, but yeah. It's got real world implications.
There is a art gallery called Wayland with WY. So I'm sure with how many companies are out there, you'll find some crossover names. But
it was an online service from 1984 to 2001.
Yeah. Well, it's defunct now, so it's up for
It
grabs.
is.
But
it's up for grabs.
So yeah, in addition to the Seeks Incorporation that was added with Isolation, we could see another major corporate player in the Alien universe, which is cool. I mean, it kind of alludes to the fact that this show could deal with corporate espionage. But as far as the characters, what we've heard of them so far, just speaking to what
do you want to read out the more up to date one?
So this was a post of ours from January where we confirmed the Illuminati's scoop on the first character details.
So this was their second.
Oh, the second character details. And they reported it looks like Alien is looking to cast a man between 20 and 30 for the role of J.D. Hermit. J.D. Hermit, known as Hermit, is a human medic for Prodigy Tactical Response, the private military of Prodigy Corporation. So we also have PMCs, which is interesting. Hermit is described as a young man with an anxious temperament, but a good heart. Hermit is struggling to find his way, believing himself to be cursed as he mourns the loss of his family. Hermit was particularly close with his 10-year-old sister Marcy, who he was told died of cancer. Hermit is driven to help others, but he feels untethered and isolated in his grief. However, in the face of great danger, Hermit proves that people have severely underestimated him and that he, in fact, has the heart of a hero. Alien is also looking to cast a woman in her mid-20s to mid-30s to play Wendy. Wendy is described as tall, athletic, and androgynous. Wendy is not a human. Instead, she is a, quote, hybrid, a superhuman who is essentially perfect. However, all is not as it appears with Wendy, as she, in fact, has the mind of Hermit's 10-year-old sister Marcy. She learns how to live and control this new body under the tutelage of synth scientist Kirsch and human scientist Dane Silva. So 2 more characters that have been revealed. Wendy eventually becomes a leader to the hybrids. So there are multiple of these hybrids, and creates the path for a new era of enhanced beings. Wendy, once she reaches full development, will have super strength, speed, agility, combined with the limitless courage of a young mind. Wendy is not only a new being, but a tool of monumental value to the world. And Noah Hawley also kind of alluded to some of these themes earlier in the month of January when he said, in the movies, we have this Weyland-Yutani Corporation, which is clearly also developing artificial intelligence. But what if there are other companies trying to look at immortality in a different way with cyborg enhancements or transhuman downloads? Which of these technologies is going to win? So, as far as those characters and those themes, I know, again, some fans were not super happy with the character descriptions there, in terms of Wendy being essentially perfect. But I do think there's some interesting elements there, and I think there is precedent for the consciousness transference. Aaron, you mentioned earlier Aliens versus Predator 2, where we had the scientist Eisenberg, whose father was a synth scientist, and after Eisenberg's accident, he transferred his consciousness into a synthetic body. I am kind of curious as to the route they are going to go with that, in terms of, is this going to be like Chappie, where it's a total digital consciousness download, or the movie Transcendence, if you've seen either of those, Eric? Or is this going to be like Ghost in the Shell, where they're taking someone's physical brain and putting it in an android body?
Yeah, it's well, I mean, it's called a hybrid, so we don't yet know whether are they mean hybrid as in like genetic hybrid sort of thing, or hybrid as in my guess would be flesh and synthetic, in which case they might as well just call them cyborgs. But that whole deal was what I was referring to earlier about Caprica, because in Caprica there was a 16-year-old girl who died in the very first episode, and she made herself a digital avatar, and they put the digital, which was basically a digital copy of her personality, blah blah blah. They put that into these robotic machines, which they called, Cylons. That was the first of the Cylons sort of thing, and they had all these amazing upgrades in aiming and whatever, and he got a military contract. And it was a character who, they thought that girl had died, and it strikes me as very, 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 very similar to that.
I haven't heard of that show before, actually. Caprica.
Yeah, it only had one series apparently. It was, when was it made? 2010. So about a bit over a decade ago now. But yeah, it's very similar to that. And even down to the hermit. Although what struck me about this was, I think Mr. H also said that in his news coverage of this, that you got a company called Prodigy who's responsible for a prodigy. It's a little on the nose, and you're having but more than that, you've got a character who's withdrawn, who's being called Hermit. These things are not subtle, so this is what I'm saying. I when they're presenting these things, I don't mind if, so long as they do it in a refreshing, creative way. But things like that feel a bit, it's been done before, and it's like they're almost trolling us with the names. But yeah, it could be. Let's hope it's interesting. It's my fear is that it's retreading ground that we've seen in other stuff. That's all.
Yeah. I do find the PMC aspect kind of interesting, because it makes me wonder how the political situation on Earth is going to be presented here. Because we know, even though the corporations have a lot of power, you still have different Earth governments at this point. And these are elaborated more in the RPG, which, again, we don't know or think Hawley is going to pay too much attention to this, but it makes you wonder, because this has been shown in the film, albeit just on screens and in the background, of things like the Three World Empire, of things of the United Americas. Like, how is that going to be discussed in the show? How are these political elements going to take place, or is it just going to be corporations rule the world? And is it going to be simple like that?
I don't think we'll see any of the things like the Three World Empire or the Union of Progressive Peoples. That was a thing in the RPG that was giving you more of a sandbox to play. That was those guys, digging into the lore. That was digging into Ron Cobb's notes, Dan O'Bannon's notes, and unused scripts. I have zero expectation that we're going to see anything like that in the show, which is a shame because, the RPGs are essentially lore guides, lore Bibles. It would be nice if these creators used and utilized and delved into, but I think too much of it is we're going to do our own thing. This is my story. This is my playground. I'm going to play with what I want to do. And when it comes to that, they very rarely look at the expanded universe. This isn't, Marvel with
But that is a
this.
double-edged sword, I think, with the creative freedom, because especially when you're working in a big established franchise, because you want creators to have the freedom to explore new aspects of a franchise and do stories that haven't been told before that are unique and interesting. But you also look at what happened with Scott and the prequels and how divisive those were, and you wonder if Holly is going to do something along those lines, even though this is kind of different to Scott's work, I think. But yeah, as you've said, there are some similarities as well. Even
I
with
mean,
the
nothing prevents. We don't know how it's going to go. There could be hints of it going. They might decide to do that with like season 2. We'll see. Blah blah blah. It's not even, Adam, as you said, like corporations rule the world. We're just seeing the big players in this story happen to be corporations and corporate representatives. With the frustrating thing about in here is, once again, we're talking in a vacuum. We might well see a lot of those things in here, but it's all speculation and guesswork right now. What I
But
would
people
say
enjoy
is,
that. People enjoy that.
yeah, what I
We
would
enjoy
say
that as
is,
fans.
what I would say is, it doesn't really matter whether they play with those elements so long as they drive the story forward. Would it feel like there's a purpose to it if they just do name checks of things just for the sake of name checks? I would say no, don't worry about that. Just concentrate on crafting the best story they can, assuming it's original enough. Will it matter if we get hints of Three World Empire and stuff? No, be nice,
I
but
don't think so.
name checks for the sake of name checks. Let's just hope it's a good story.
But even established in the movie Aliens, where they talk about, the corporation will have to sneak these things back to Earth because of ICC quarantine. So it is established that there are Earth governments that
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
and military jurisdiction
Yeah.
that do have control over the corporations. And so
But again, that's driving. That was driving that story. That very much played into Burke's conspiratorial thing. That drove the story forward.
and Aaron,
But
we
then
went over the sorry, go ahead.
But from like a world building and an alien nerd point of view, just to have those name checks in there it is world building, isn't it? And it's nice to see elements of the expanded universe being pulled in. That's why a lot of us like the RPG, because it's reconciling a load of these different parts of the EU and different parts of the lore and old scripts and stuff like that. And it's one of the appealing things about it. And we're sci-fi nerds. We like that.
Honestly,
So
it's
to see
one of
it
the
in a
appealing
show would be
things.
ace.
It's one of the appealing things about the Mandalorian and Boba Fett series as well. They have so many drops of nostalgia there for fans from the EU toys, like all sorts of stuff. They'll just drop into that show, and it is nostalgia pandering for sure. It's member berries, but it's handled in a way, I think, that serves the show and it serves fans without being like obnoxious fan service. It's fan service done right. And it would be nice to see a bit more of that in alien media, I think. As far as the characters go, Aaron and I had discussed while you stepped out for a moment. As far as the consciousness transference element, do you think it's going to be like actually physically taking a brain and putting it into an android body, or will this be more chatty, more transcendence, where it's a digital transference of consciousness?
I can't see them going Paul Verhoeven RoboCop kind of thing. As like we were saying as well earlier, there's this precedence in this in Alien for consciousness transfer, and that's what the character details straight up say, if I'm not
I think
mistaken.
he says digital immortality or something, which does kind of play into the aspect of Prometheus. Weyland was looking for immortality, and
See, this is why I always said this was right up Scott Street. You know, I teased this on the board as far back as when we started getting the first details of it, that I thought this was going to be really something Scott would enjoy. And I think that is so him, you know, because as he gets older, he explores he's more interested in mortality. And that's why we're getting a lot of these more synthetic related things. I believe personally, anyway, is where his interest comes from. So, through, like I said earlier, through that, I think it feels alien through Scott. But outside of that, it's, yes, there's precedence, but not quite as much as, say, perhaps setting something on Earth would be. You know, that was the subject of a huge arc at the start of Alien's expanded universe. This, not so much. So it does feel a little weird at the minute. And I wouldn't say it's a big thing I'm interested in. I think as far as exploring the idea of prolonging life or stuff like that in the Alien universe goes, I'd be more interested in the body horror kind of elements of it, of like doing things with the black goo. I know you'll probably roll your eyes and hate that and that kind of thing, but that's something I'd find more alien off the bat. You know, this idea of toying with the goo and going transhuman in the way that Blue Marsalis does in Into Charybdis and stuff like that. So this doesn't quite feel as alien to me, but you know me, I'm willing to roll with it and see how it goes. If it works out being presented as good and the story and the series as a whole is good, because at the end of the day, that's the crux of it, isn't
That's how
it?
it's done. Yeah.
If the series is good, we'll not nitpick it as much. But if people start to get pissed off with the show as we're rolling on and the whole package isn't great, people are going to nitpick it more.
Yeah.
So
It's the same
We
with
want
Isolation.
to go full throttle Cronenberg at some point.
maybe not full, maybe not
The Fly,
Cronenberg.
full on
but-
Brundlefly. Give Jeff
but-
Goldblum a cameo.
Give me Syl, you know, give me a theatrical Syl in the Alien
We got a
universe.
theatrical still.
Well, okay.
I think
said
we have
in the
enough of that
Alien
stuff in the
universe.
Marvel comics, honestly.
No, give it me. Give
Yeah.
it me.
Let's just
on
go back to
the screen.
Alien roots.
But it's, again, it's nothing that's going to dampen my enthusiasm to fuck this show early on, you know, that kind of attitude. But it's one of the things where I'm like, okay, let's see how it goes.
It's more of a cerebral thing than a Giga thing. It feels like at the moment.
Whereas I'd prefer it to go down the Giga thing. But
Yeah.
that's personal taste as well. You guys know how much I love that kind of stuff.
Well, it was kind of interesting in the investor meeting where they first officially announced development for the series, where Landgraf was on this like virtual stage and they had like this alien environment. It did look very Giger-esque, honestly. And you know, we're always hoping for those elements to make their way back into the franchise more.
Give me some engineer ruins that look like that, or give me some hive or something, you know.
See, that's what I said earlier.
I know, I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. I would like that.
But as fans have been asking, there are aliens in this Alien series, and we were able to exclusively reveal the creative monster effects studio that will be responsible for handling the aliens, which is going to be Weta in New Zealand. What is New Zealand based? Right. Yeah. We are unsure how much will be handled by Weta Workshop versus Weta Digital. I would assume both will be on the project, and there will be hopefully a good number of alien practical effects as well as digital effects. But they're super competent at both. Recently, I've looked at their creature work in their digital creature work for Weta Digital. I think it's called Weta FX now, and they kind of changed. And I think Peter Jackson might have sold off some of it to, was it Epic, I think, I think it was Epic. But regardless, it's Weta FX now as the digital side of things. But their work on the Tomorrow War with the creatures just looked fantastic.
It did.
So I feel, and I still need to see that movie myself, but I feel like
it was pretty standard. No, it wasn't.
I liked it.
I enjoyed it, but it was kind of standard.
It kind of
sci-fi with a bit of time travel thrown in.
It kind of looked like Battle LA if you ever saw that movie.
Yeah, there's elements of that in there. It's worth a watch.
Battle for LA.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a watch, but I don't think it's the best the genre necessarily has to
It's
offer.
like got like what Independence Day was for alien dogfights. It's that for monster movies. It's just it's a fun monsters killing, and there are some quite gruesome things in it as well. There's like a couple of them bring down some horses you're seeing in footage and stuff. It's that kind of, and they're interesting creature designs as well.
And there was a little bit of thing to it towards the end that I quite
Yes,
liked.
there was.
I really
Yes.
enjoyed that.
Yeah,
it's
if
really
you remember the ADI pilot design and the stuff that was around in that space, it's clearly very inspired by that. Yeah.
Yep. So ADI will not be coming back for this Alien series, but who knows? Maybe they'll be doing the new movie since that was announced. We do know their work will be in Prey, and Odd Studio did the effects for Covenant, for Prometheus.
Odd Creatures. Remember, it was Creatures Inc. and Odd Studios for Covenant. Creatures Inc. worked on Prometheus, doing various prosthetic effects for the engineer, and then the two merged for Covenant.
Gotcha. And Weta, I guess, did work on Prometheus, both workshop and digital. I think they did the Deacon in that, didn't they? Didn't they do the practical Deacon on set?
I can't remember, but
Were
I
they
do.
At least did
Covenant?
the deleted five-field.
They did,
version.
and that's I always lament that. I wish we had seen that digital five-field.
I think it was the better version than the zombie five-field.
I didn't like that version personally. It looked too out of proportion. The way it moved made it look it looked silly to me.
For me, it was all about being that weird-looking thing, not quite being
like
human.
in still images, it looks great, but when I saw it in footage, I thought, I can't maybe.
Well, we've got to remember that it was also unfinished.
Yes,
but the design concept, I much preferred that. I wanted it to look more like transforming into an alien.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But how are you guys feeling about Weta on this project, handling the xenomorphs?
Honestly, I'm more just shocked to the core that I keep forgetting that Weta didn't do the prawns.
Yeah, and we found out there was another company.
Didn't do what?
The prawns in District 9. A lot of people.
They did the designs. They did the concept art. As far as the actual prawn creatures, it was Image Engine. They did the digital effects. I will say, though, Weta Digital did Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets and Avatar. They did the digital effects for those. Both of those have humanoid aliens that are crazy good looking. So
they look too much like CG creatures in both of those.
Not in Avatar. Honestly, Avatar I still think has
so cartoonish in that regard, though.
I think that's more to do with the color palette, because they do have those bright cartoonish colors, and it's that kind of background. I mean, me personally, this was the one piece of news which did make me go, oh, okay, this has got interesting, because I remember ever since Lord of the Rings, and that was 2001 or so, there's been this call on the various alien messaging boards to go, what would be good? Getting Weta involved in an alien film. And now we've got it. Now, we don't know to what extent. I mean, for all we know, they might just be making little sort of worm-like parasites, and that's all we see of their work. But whatever they're going to do, it's going to look quality. So this has made
they are making more than words. We can't confirm.
Let's hope.
There are aliens in this alien show.
Let's hope. Yeah.
No, we can confirm this quite.
They are doing more than worms.
Good.
But I mean, if it was a District 9 situation as well, where it was them handling
that's
the design, because
somebody else does it.
Well, District 9, they did the concept art for the weaponry as well, I think.
Did they?
And I believe in Elysium as well, which had like really cool.
See, I know it's sacrilege to say this, but ever since the prawns, I have wanted to see a mocap, photorealistic CG alien, just because I feel like it might be easier to get this. Well, I suppose this has come on more on since Isolation, but to get that kind of movement that we get from Stompy, I'm so desperate to see the kind of, the reveal of Stompy when he comes out the vents and he does this sort of weird twist and he's so graceful and
like a baby horse
mesmerizing.
being born.
It's just, I think it is honestly some of the best the Alien has ever looked. And I just struggle to see a bloke in a suit accomplishing that.
I don't know. We had the
from-
gymnast in Aliens. I think
Well,
you could-
no, because of the material as well. Can imagine how constricting some of the suits must be to pull that off. And that is where I think that a mocap suit would excel at this. And that is the kind of movement that I'm really desperate to see
If
in
they-
an Alien
It's
film.
depend on the
show.
director. We saw Ridley Scott do this in Covenant, and what we actually saw on screen, I always said one of the big problems with that is it lacked any sense of weight and inertia. And I said
Yeah.
they should have based the movement on that sequence in Aliens where it leaps from one wall to the other when it's coming after Ripley, who's just rescued Newt. That's the movement, because you had that weight. In Covenant, there was no sense of weight, no sense of inertia. With Neil Blomkamp, he gives the prawns, he gave them that. They felt like living creatures. That's the difference between Blomkamp, who knows how to handle CGI, and Ridley Scott, who either didn't know how to, or he had a weird idea and he said that they need to be weightless, and it didn't gel with what we've seen of them before. It'll depend on who directs those episodes.
But even Blomkamp in his films, even though the creatures were completely CG, you still had a lot of practical effects just with the sets and all that stuff. And I do feel like with Covenant, the CG was too heavy in the Alien, and maybe Eric, that's just like it wasn't done right. And I agree with you, Aaron, that if it was done to the level of the prawns in District 9 with modern tech, I think fans would be much more forgiving if these were totally digital creatures. But for me, this is a series built on practical effects, and you see it with Jurassic World too. Like with Jurassic World, the fans kept clamoring for more practical effects, and from the 2015 film to now the new one coming out, they've increased the number of practical effects in that series because of the fan demand for it. We've seen it in Star Wars as well. In the series, there's a lot of strong digital effects. There's a lot of strong practical effects. They're bringing back old techniques too, like the Phil Tippett stop motion occasionally in that series made an appearance or two. So I think when you play to the effects strengths and you hybrid them so that they're together, they
Definitely.
are far more effective. It makes the CG way more believable. And
It's a
we know,
balance.
sorry?
It's a balance.
Yeah, and we know what a workshop can do this because their work on Lord of the Rings, and some of the digital effects in Lord of the Rings have aged, but that was a really good example of strong practical to digital balance. And then in the Hobbit movies, it was too far digital. People complained about that. It was the same thing with the Thing prequel. So I personally really hope that they bring a strong balance of practical and digital, because I know what it can do both. But it is always cool to see those digital movements of the Alien. As far back as Resurrection, when we saw the legs, like we thought that was so cool, but it was done sparingly and it was played to CG strength. So I personally hope they just don't go a total CG route for the Alien. I hope there's a good balance of practical to CG in terms of creatures.
Adam, you might know this a bit more because you're more into effects and ADI and stuff. What I remember in The Hobbit, they were experimenting with a new kind of frame rate. Did
They
that have an
were.
effect on
That
these
never
special
caught
effects?
on. Yeah, that never
With
caught
like
on.
the actual motion, maybe that would have given more of a false feel.
I
if they'd
don't.
done the old
I don't
frame rate.
think the frame rate really affected the
Okay.
believability of the effects. But for people, it was just weird. I thought it was kind of cool because I'm used to playing like video games in high frame rates. But a lot of people felt the high frame rate eliminated the cinematic feel of that and made it look too much like you were watching like a theater show. You were watching a play on the screen, and it was very weird feeling. Did either of you guys see the movie with a high frame rate when that came out, the first Hobbit? I think they only did it for the first one.
I slept through the first one.
Oh, did you? The theater?
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've fallen asleep in a movie theater.
I only
You
saw
just get
them
tired,
on
don't you?
home release. I like the Hobbit film, but as I say, I only saw it on the small screen, so I might have had a different experience.
I find Tolkien boring, to be perfectly frank. Always have. It took me a year to read The Hobbit. It took me a year to read The Fellowship of the Rings, and I only did it through commitment to my dad because he loved them. I fucking hated them. And I just don't like the films.
Yeah, the new series looks kind of cool. with Amazon. And that's another example of something that was previously a theatrical series that is now having a very high budget TV series. And so that's another thing I'm curious about with this Alien series is what level of budget are we talking about here? It's very possible, given what was talked about with the new Alien movie that was just announced, the TV series, well, it's actually probable will have a higher budget than this new movie that Fede Alvarez is helming.
Yeah, I suppose in the long run, because it works out as per episode, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Tell you what, I'm curious about is if Ridley will direct an episode.
I would
really
imagine
curious about that.
just for the name drop, he probably would. I don't know how he'd feel about. Well, I mean, I guess he didn't write Covenant and Prometheus, right? He had a hand in the creative process, which we know he has less of a hand in the creative process with this one.
Well, there's an obvious way to find that out. Did he direct any episodes of Ray?
It was the first three, I think.
Yeah.
Wasn't
There you go.
it?
It's
Didn't
probably
his son
creative.
as well? Luke Scott
Yeah.
did some episodes.
I think his son did a lot of episodes.
I honestly really like Luke Scott as a director. I think with the viral shorts he did with Covenant, he did a really good job.
And
I would like
Prometheus.
to see and Prometheus. I forgot he directed those too. Yeah, those
And The
were
Martian,
really strong.
actually.
I'll have
if
to
I
see
remember
those.
rightly.
I don't think I ever saw the viral marketing stuff for The Martian, but I love that movie. But yeah,
Me
Luke
too.
Scott, I think, could just follow in his father's footsteps, and I think he would be a good Alien director as well. One more thing I wanted to touch on in terms of practical effects in Covenant, you look at all the behind the scenes photos where you see the alien suit. And then we watched the 40th anniversary shorts, right, where they had the alien stunt suit. And it did feel like there was more of a presence to the alien there when you could actually see it. I know so many people see behind the scenes photos of that alien suit in Covenant, and they're like, oh, why wasn't that in the movie? And even on the Blu-ray, you had a deleted scene of a practical neomorph creeping in the hallway. And I was like, that's so cool and creepy. Like, could we just have a little of that with the CG? So I do feel like it's a risky gamble if they just go the complete CG route for the aliens. I think with the Tomorrow War, you can get away with that stuff more because there's not precedent for it. These are completely new creatures just for this movie. But with Alien, there's a legacy of practical effects. There's an expectation of practical effects. And if you leave that out, you're going to be leaving some portion of fans unsatisfied.
Yeah, definitely. And it's the same for the Predator as well. And that's something that I think, other than Ridley Scott, a lot of the directors have realized. Not Cameron, Anderson knew it. The Strauss brothers knew it as well when they went on to do the AVPs, and it was, regardless of the end result of the films, they knew that was an element that the fans love and want. So I completely agree with you. That there is a legacy and an expectation there, and as much as I am open to the mocap suit to see that kind of movement, I would always want to see a practical alien in there as well, even if just for cool behind the scene photos.
Yeah.
But it helps with the actors. It helps.
It evokes the emotion with the actors too, which is why I think Ridley had it on set, and the lighting reference as well. It was interesting too. If Alien 5 would have been made, I think Blomkamp was going to have Studio ADI doing practical and Weta doing digital. So to see those two studios working together, and that's always cool too, where you have the two different studios. Like in the first AVP, like ADI did the practical. I can't remember what company did the digital effects for AVP, but I thought they were solid. The CG aliens in the first AVP.
For the time, they're okay.
Yeah, I don't know. That scene where they're all crawling on the Queen was pretty cool.
Well, the one where they getting before her, I think looks a little dated.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen that. I really want.
Well, I thought you watched that every month.
4K cuts of those movies, not every month, at least once a year. I'll watch them, but
that's fair. All right, anything else you guys want to talk about with the TV show?
So Hulu, we have this coming to Hulu. We have the Predator movie Prey coming to Hulu, and now it's been announced this new Alien feature film is coming to Hulu. It seems like Hulu's going to be the place to be for Alien and Predator content. I know we've seen some fans not super happy about that. I know it's more understandable with the show, and the show is FX on Hulu, and FX also, I believe, is on regular television as well. So who knows if it's going to be Hulu exclusive or FX just on TV and Hulu. We don't know. But how are you two feeling about this streaming future for the franchises?
My concern, Look, the quality of streaming productions is so high now. It's like we were talking about earlier with The Expanse, and we've got Lord of the Rings coming up. That's what 100 million or something. The budget for that, something ridiculous. No, it's not 100 million. That's ridiculous.
I think it is ridiculously high.
Yeah,
It might
but
be.
I think a lot of fans are in the wrong about it, but they're equating to streaming, straight to streaming and straight to DVD. This isn't.
Those are the old days. Yeah.
This isn't 2000s. This isn't
Yeah.
Starship Troopers 2: Heroes of the Federation
Oh, God.
reusing the effects
Let's
from the
hope not.
film. Well, it isn't. We know it isn't.
Yeah.
This is a completely different environment, entertainment landscape, and the two do not marry up. And believing that it's old thinking. It's in the past. It doesn't bother me. I mean, I'm always going to miss the chance to see it on the big screen. I'm never ever not going to miss that opportunity, and that relates more to, Prey and I guess Alien 5, whatever we're going to call it now, than it does to the TV show. But my worry is not being able to own it. I mean, it's not that big of a deal, I suppose, because we did get Netflix's various Marvel shows. We're still getting Star Trek on DVD, stuff like that. I don't really know how it works with some of Marvel's.
Well, with Disney Plus, none of the Marvel series and none of the Star Wars series have gotten physical home release, and none of them plan to have physical home releases. And AJ actually made the point here that, why would they sell you that when they could just have a subscriber for life if you're a fan? And I think that's the main concern.
That's the worry. That's the worry.
You see things with The Expanse where they'll release it on Blu-ray eventually, and streaming quality, it can be variable, especially depending on your internet. I know most places have high-speed internet these days, but there's just that like clean quality you get with a Blu-ray, and even more so now with a 4K Blu-ray, that I don't think should be forgotten about. And I do hope that the show and the movies coming out have physical home releases. I think Hulu has been more okay with that than Netflix and Disney Plus have, but we'll just have to see.
And the problem with that is that it does encourage piracy.
Yeah.
There are some people who just either can't afford or they just don't want to subscribe to Disney for various different reasons, and they're going to encourage piracy. On the other hand, we do know from ADI when they did Harbinger Down, they said it costs a lot of money to actually print out DVDs and Blu-rays. So it's often a case of they're not even guaranteed to make, break even, let alone make a profit. But with an Alien and Predator film, you would think that's more of a foregone conclusion.
There's more
brand. Brand recognition. Yeah, exactly. I think, like Aaron says, it's going to be a real shame to see something like this, more so with Alien, because it does have that legacy of being an art piece. When it comes to a film, it's going to be a shame not to see that on a big screen.
Mm-hmm.
But is it going to be a loss that, it's just straight to streaming? No, because we've seen some really good quality, and I do mean quality productions, go straight to streaming. And it's not like it's a little studio. This is Disney's own streaming service, so it's going to receive the attention it deserves as far as streaming releases go. But it will be a shame. But as some people who've commented on this story have said, we're now starting to see a trend where it's really only the sort of guaranteed blockbusters that they're getting any interest in putting out. And Alien and Predator films, unfortunately, have not had a great track record of being blockbusters. People think the original Predator and the original Aliens were massive commercial hits in their day. At the box office, not so much. It's more like the legacy that's come after it and merchandise that they've received that. But from a moneymaker perspective, I can see why they're doing this. It's a shame.
I think at the time for R-rated films, Alien and Aliens and Predator did pretty well.
I mean, the other
adjusted
thing
for
is,
inflation.
There are justifiable worries because sometimes we see productions like Books of Blood, which was a Clive Barker thing. That came out recently on Disney's streaming service, and that's meant to be based on Clive Barker's original novellas. And that was terrible. A lot of Clive Barker and Hellraiser, it wasn't a Hellraiser book, but there's a link there. The unanimous vote was, what the hell were they doing? And so there is going to be, it's not guaranteed that just because it is brand recognition, it's going to be done right. But you're going to get that as a if they released it on the cinema, there's no guarantee of that either. I think people are going to have more of a concern, rightly or wrongly, they are going to have that concern about the fact that Ridley Scott is involved. Because as soon as you mention that name with an alien film, there is that section, rightly or wrongly, of fandom going, oh my God, it's going to be just like the prequel. There's also another section that go, oh yes, just like the prequels. But I think that's going to be more of a concern going forward because he's producing this and apparently he's producing the film. But
we can tell you this is Hawley's show.
Yeah,
this is Hawley's show.
Yeah,
Scott is just executive producer, I think.
It's just paying the bills.
Yeah, or finding who's going to pay the bills. But
yeah,
or just has his name attached for the show's clout.
Well, and as we said, unless he happens to direct some episodes, in which case, okay.
But it's still Hawley's show. He's still the showrunner.
Which was the same for Raised by Wolves as well, wasn't it?
Yep. I think he had a bit more involved. Well, I'm not sure with Raised by Wolves. I need to research that one a bit more.
All right, so I think we are all talked about on Noah Hawley's show. Of course, we're keeping our eyes out for more official information. And, with it not being in production as yet, there's no real genuine marketing taking place. So it is still very much early days drought kind of news leading up to, when we're actually going to start to see filming and production and stuff like that. But I don't think there's much else we can say with this one. So let's talk about the brand new news of a new Alien movie being in development. Because I don't think any of us expected to be talking about this.
Nope.
So, as of recording yesterday, we got some pretty exciting details. Adam, what the hell happened? As the news poster, you can go over this.
So we are getting a new Alien movie, which came out of nowhere.
It might be a bit premature to say we're getting it. It's just in development.
It's in development. Hopefully, this doesn't turn out to be another Alien 5, where we get our hopes up and then it fades away. But we didn't expect to be hearing anything about an Alien movie until after the FX TV series. So this did catch us by surprise. So a new Alien movie is coming, and I guess this will be written and directed by Fede Alvarez. This director has helmed the Evil Dead remake, which came out in 2013. More recently, The Girl in the Spider's Web of the Dragon Tattoo series, and a film called Don't Breathe, which I've heard mixed things about. But this guy kind of goes with horror films, I guess. More of a horror director. And apparently he just casually pitched this Alien idea to Ridley Scott a while back, and the idea remained with Scott for a while. And late last year, Scott hit him up about it and said, do you want to do this? So this was exclusively broken by The Hollywood Reporter, and this is from their news about it. Alvarez's take is being kept deep inside the studio's chest, but sources describe it as unconnected to the previous movies. According to sources, Alvarez is a rabid fan of the franchise and casually pitched a take to Scott many years ago. The idea remained implanted in Scott's brain until late last year when he called Alvarez out of the blue and asked him if the younger filmmaker was still up for it. Alvarez didn't have to be asked twice. 20th Century picked up the project, quote, purely off the strength of Fede's pitch, said division president Steve Aspel. Quote, it was just a really good story with a bunch of characters you haven't seen before. So I guess 20th Century Studios president Steve Aspel, who also talked to The Hollywood Reporter about the time period of Prey, spoke to them about this Alien movie as well. Aspel, who recently spoke to Hollywood Reporter about the future of 20th Century Studios, said by doing the project for Hulu, there wouldn't be the pressure to whittle down the potential edginess that could come with theatrical considerations. It's not a film that has to be all things to all people with those gargantuan budgets. They get to be authentically what they are, and this is closer to its genre roots. Okay. So,
Didn't we talk about this when we did our future hopes and dreams
yeah,
for the future? You know, this idea of a lower budget standalone Alien film where they have to try and not go big,
yeah,
but go little.
we
So
talked about that.
I find that prospect really exciting. I'm not gonna lie. I just and I think it was something we also brought up when we were talking about the possibility of Blumhouse, you know, getting
Yeah.
hold of the
Yeah,
license.
you look at the returns that those lower budget horror movies can pull sometimes, and they can still create a pretty compelling world. Like, look at the Purge movies. Like, those movies are super low budget and they pull huge returns. And so I think we've been saying for a while, Aaron, that Alien should be going lower budget, can be more of a horror oriented, kind of back to its roots, smaller contained stories, which can be unrelated to the previous stories, which they mentioned that as well. Like, this is unconnected to the previous films. I love that.
Mhm.
It reminds me of those 40th anniversary shorts that just did their own thing, like something like that, but as a full movie, which I'm super hyped about. I think that could work really,
And just
really
the
well.
comics and books as well. You know, that is
Yeah.
the entire feel of a lot of the EU. So I'm really excited about just that single prospect. I mean, what about you, Eric?
Well, there's two things here right off the bat, basically. Right in that quote there, it's not a film that has to be all. Sorry, before that, there wouldn't be the pressure to whittle down the potential edginess which comes with theatrical considerations. And he says, they get to be authentically what they are, and this is closer to its genre roots. That right there suggests heavily to me that they are definitely going to lean in strongly to horror, and it will be very much an adult rating. Some people do worry about PG-13 when it's coming to this. The possibility of that with the upcoming Predator film. This sounds like they just said, you know what we need to do? And they've pitched it a bit like Alien Isolation without the Amanda Ripley link, which is great. It sounds a lot like that. It's isolate the feel of Isolation without an Amanda Ripley. It might be one like her,
Yeah.
but there's not that link character
Mm.
because they said it's completely original characters. And the other thing is, of course, the director. Now, I haven't seen Don't Breathe. I did see the advert for it. It looked very interesting, but I have seen the Evil Dead remake. I thought personally, now I know Evil Dead fans had an issue with it because it wasn't comical like the original source
Yeah.
material,
Well,
but I
neither was
thought,
the old original Dead or old original Evil Dead.
well,
Uh,
yeah, but
it
there was
became
that
more comical through
issue.
the
Yeah,
series.
yeah. But I thought as a straight horror film, especially one that's dealing with demonic possession, I thought it was really well done.
I did too. I
And
really enjoyed his Evil Dead remake.
I thought in particular that's got relevance for an Alien film, the part where, the girl gets caught by the tree and what happens with her in that. I could see, yeah, if that director was being given, they're helming an Alien film, how he did the tension and that sort of, psychosexual part to do with that scene. I could see him handling the material of Alien really well. And the whole film, it did a lot of good things with tension, which is what you need
Yeah.
in an Alien film.
And the whole film
So
was just in like a cabin in the woods,
yeah,
like very
yeah,
low budget, and he was able to do a lot
it's
with it.
exactly, it's dealing with these elements, these things that there's the old phrase that, like with the Strauss brothers, they said it's a gritty film and it's back to its roots. These are the elements that you need to go back to the root. There's similar kind of. This sounds like someone who might give us what Blomkamp was saying in his interviews with what he was going to want to give. Now, all he's got to do is basically say something about H.R. Giger's aesthetics, and basically we're there. I think. So long as again, we're talking a vacuum, but these things, I'm hearing good things right from the offset, and keep it there. And I'm interested in this project.
I mean, the whole thing as well about not having to whittle down its edginess makes me sort of think perhaps it is going to lean more on that sexual side. There's always a little bit of you don't want the subtext to go too far. But I mean, even if it went a little bit further, I think could be interesting because that's always going to be there, and I think that is.
I mean, as long as you get the feel of horror, that at least the first two films. I don't say third because Fincher has always been one that's quoted as saying one of the big problems with the third film is that it went for squeezy horror, not scary horror. The first two films did deal with horror. Bring that back, and it feels like that quote is very much hinting at that. Like, especially that might even be, they're bringing egg morphing back or something. Don't know if it will, but it will be
so much
in line with that quote, the edginess, and it's going to the roots of the genre. Maybe it's something like that.
Well, I've wanted this for such a long time. Something that is not connected to Ripley at all because she had 4 movies. Sure, I'd like to see a continuation of her resurrection character in some form, but more than that. And after the prequels too were just so muddled for me, I just want to see a classic feeling alien tale like the comics, like Isolation, that's just set somewhere in this universe. And it sounds like this is what this could be. And I think it's an awesome idea. Well, we know nothing about the idea, but I think it's an awesome concept in terms of, hey, let's just do something that's totally unrelated to what came before. And I think the Fox president has a good point. I mean, fans I've seen some griping about the Hulu release with this as well. But there is something to be said that you look at the creative risk taken on streaming movies and shows now versus the creative or the lack of creative risks taken in theatrical movie releases. There is an element where they're trying to please mainstream audiences in big theatrical releases now, at least some of the time. It shouldn't be that way. I think you can have big movies, big theatrical movies that are bold and unique, like Dune. But at the same time, there is this pressure for the studio, I think, in terms of theatrical releases, where they are trying too hard to cater to our mainstream audience rather than appealing to niche fan tastes. And I think this could be a good avenue for doing that. I mean, again, people are thinking about this like the old times, like direct to DVD stuff. These aren't those times anymore. You have exclusive streaming movies that are nominated for Best Picture now, the Oscars. Like, times are different. The industry has changed completely. I will always enjoy the theatrical experience. I love going to movie theaters. I'm glad that's coming back more, and I'm seeing Batman this weekend, and I'm excited about that. But things are just changing, and more theatrical quality movies are going to be released on streaming. Yeah, there will be something missed in going to the movie theater, but I feel like a lot of people have big screens at home now, and that's become
that was
quite
exactly what I
accessible.
was going to say.
So you can make a nice movie night, get some light dimmers or whatever if you don't have them, and make a little movie theater at home. I know there's also movie theaters are expensive too now, and sometimes the crowds are not great. So it's like there's advantages to both. I hope, I really like what HBO Max was doing, where you'd have theatrical releases and streaming releases released on the same day, where you could see it how you want to see it. So that would be more ideal, I think. But I'm not opposed to this. Again, like we talked about in the podcast, though, I just want eventual physical release for this movie and Prey and the Alien series. If this is just locked to a streaming platform forever, that'll be a little more difficult for me as a fan.
I guess it's still early days in seeing how Hulu streaming is going to handle that, isn't it? Because I guess this has only really been a thing since the Disney takeover. So it might be worth looking into seeing how other Hulu streaming releases have dealt with the home releases.
I think Disney has an ownership stake in Hulu.
They do.
But I don't know if it's total.
Okay. I think it's just worth looking into, for precedents and stuff like that. And I'm actually really, I'm not overly familiar with Fede Alvarez like you guys either. I haven't seen Don't Breathe. I'm going to. Certainly, I'm going to now. But
I want to watch his Dragon Tattoo movie as well because I think that's a cool series. So.
But just like looking at Don't Breathe on IMDb, it's 7.1. It's pretty reasonable. Evil Dead's rated a little less at 6.5. But I have seen that, and it is one of only 2 films I've ever had to go and take a step outside while watching.
And you didn't watch the unrated cut. I still need to watch that one.
So
there was actually an interesting facet to that does actually relate to how he might possibly handle. Like, we don't know what the story is, that apparently now. I don't feel the Evil Dead remake had too much gore, but apparently he said in an interview that one of the criticisms of the Evil Dead one was it had too much gore, and they gave the characters too much, this, that, and the other. So he said, okay, we're going to turn it on its head. We're going to have minimum of gore, and we're going to make it so that the villain can't see. Now, that in itself makes for an interesting formula for a film. So it makes you wonder, how is he going to apply that logic to an Alien film?
Because at the end of the day, Alien's not gory either, really.
No, but that's the other thing, because a lot of people say, oh, you just need gore-soaked Fabian film. You don't. How is he going to is he going to create that sort of like Lambert death sort of thing? What is he going to? Is he going to sort of try to give the alien a disability somehow? What is he going to do to play around in that sandpit?
That's a fair point, actually.
See what the typical formula is and turn it on its head, because he has shown a willingness to take a formula, turn it on its head, make it more interesting for it. And I think also because of that Don't Breathe thing, where it's a blind guy hunting people down who's invaded his home, that immediately, as I say, I haven't seen the film, I saw the trailer, but it did make me think that feels a lot like the alien in Alien Isolation, when everybody's hiding from it, don't make a sound, and you've got this thing that's stalking through. It makes me feel that might be how he's going to handle this.
It's definitely an interesting thought, yeah. I really like that. And now I'm getting excited just on that Eric's speculation alone there. It's always the risk. It's always a risk.
Yeah. I'll be checking out his other work myself that I haven't seen. But again, I liked Evil Dead. I still haven't seen the unrated cut of that either, and I need to check that out. I think it could go gory. I think just go nuts with it and make it super gory. You can do gore, I think, in a good way where there's still, it's not just about the disgust. I think Alien 3 and Resurrection, the gore got a bit in the silly fashion, but you look at Isolation and the amount of like blood in that game sometimes, and there is a bit of, I think there's a bit of gore in Isolation as well. Maybe not too much, but there's a bit.
Well, so I think done for meaningful impact, not just for the sake of it. That's what matters.
It was with Evil Dead. It was I found it really intense as a film, and even when the gore wasn't necessarily. The stuff wasn't necessarily gory, like the whole possession, the girl under the stairs stuff. She freaked me the fuck out. Yeah, she freaked me out so bad. And I hate Evil, the original series. I'm sorry, Dan. I know you're probably listening to this. As a buddy of mine who fucking is his thing. It's his Alien, his Evil Dead, the original stuff. I don't actually know how I think about the remake, but yeah, she freaked me out so much, and I liked that the remake took a more serious take on it. I fucking hate how campy and silly the originals are.
Yeah, but that was so fun though.
I hated it. I don't like Sam Raimi.
Evil Dead 2 was the best one, I thought.
But no, it was when one of the guys holds up his hand to deflect a blow and it splits his fingers. And I don't remember that necessarily being gory, but just the disfiguration of it,
cringe injury.
Yeah, kind of thing. I stood up and I just walked out the cinema and had to take a seat outside and have a breather because that just tipped me over the edge. I was like, Jesus Christ!
It must be said that in terms of Evil Dead, the TV show that was recently done actually managed to somehow every single episode virtually was gold. They managed to straddle the comedy with horror beautifully. It was the perfect, but it was much better than the original film. So it can be done. But in terms of a straight horror film, yeah, the remake of Evil Dead was I think it was handled well, and I think it also shows you how it was kind of like it was small in scale. Where you look at something like the first of the AVP films, it tried to be epic in scale with a pyramid and things like that. Sometimes, especially with Alien, you have that less is more type thing. And you look at the Evil Dead one and Don't Breathe, what is it? It's just basically set within a single house. So I think we may get that return of claustrophobia as well,
Yeah.
which it does. Works wonders for an alien film because they work in the same way as like if you've watched The Reef, which is a shark film, that's pretty low budget, but one of the things it did really well is you have characters looking through the murk of the ocean and you see this great white not dash out but very slowly loom out from the darkness and go back again, but it happens just like in real life. And if you capture that kind of essence in an alien film, you bring that claustrophobia back where you don't want to go into the shadows, and I really hope that's what this guy's going to bring to it.
Speaking of, I haven't seen The Reef, but there's another shark movie I saw called The Shallows that I thought was really good, that just focused on a single character.
That was Blake Lively, wasn't it?
Let me look.
Ryan Reynolds as well.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. I thought The Reef was better, but that had some nice things in it too.
So yeah, with them also saying characters unlike other characters, I'm kind of curious as to how that's gonna, and it also makes me hope that it doesn't fall into that Aliens trap of that one leading lady that is quite obviously going to be the survivor of the end. Give me a bunch of leading ladies,
the final girl.
Yeah, give me a bunch of leading ladies and let me not know who's going to make it to the end based on the trailer.
Well, it just says a bunch of characters you haven't seen before, which could be anything, basically.
It could be, but that's more my hope.
It just means they're unrelated. You're not going to see like somebody or other Vasquez or somebody's long lost relative.
Right, you boys good? Anything else to talk about?
I mean, it's just really cool, exciting news again out of nowhere, and I'm stoked. It feels like stuff's coming again, finally. A lot of stuff. So,
do we get to call this Alien 5? Because I guess it is.
I hope
numbered sequels are out these days.
The thing is, there's no indication that this is a prequel, so I guess this is going to be set in familiar future set territory.
It's Alien 5 until we actually get the subtitle.
Yeah.
So can we call it Alien 5? And the reporting people will be confused. They'll think it's the Blomkamp one.
We can call it Alien 5. There's been many takes. It just happens to be Alvarez as Alien 5.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you everybody for watching or listening, depending on how you're digesting this content. Thank you for supporting us with with your listen or watch. It's very much appreciated. As always, please feel free to leave us any comments, tweet at us, drop us emails, and we hope you'll stick around for the next one. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, you can find me personally at _Corporal Hicks.
If you'd like to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, it's at RidgeTop21.
And we don't ask Eric, he doesn't have one. But also make sure you're checking out the website, avpgalaxy.net. There's old school message boards on there that are still very much alive and kicking. If that's how you prefer your discussions, please come sign up, register an account, and join in with the rest of us nerds. We're also on Facebook groups as well, if you prefer your discussion to be chaos. You can find us on Alien vs Predator Galaxy Facebook community. And we also have a page, AVP Galaxy or Alien vs Predator Galaxy versus as in BS . We're on Twitter at AVP Galaxy. If you're watching this on YouTube, obviously we're on YouTube. If you're listening to it, you can also find us on YouTube, where you'll find video versions of our podcasts and video versions of our editorial pieces that we post on the website as well. Thank you, everybody, for listening or watching. This has been Corporal Hicks.
RidgeTop.
Xenomorphine.
Signing off.